Welcome to everyone with us here today, and those of you who are joining us via our recording. We have two items posted this week, and the first is a question that I posted, which is when we experience a life-threatening medical emergency, what can we learn about cognition, about behavior, and at the end of that day, about being a human being? So I would like to invite Elizabeth to lead off for us this week and share a bit of your experience and thinking in this direction, Elizabeth.
Sure, Daniel. Thank you. Just so everyone knows, part of how we got the space, I've talked to Daniel a little bit this week because last Monday I had a heart attack all of a sudden. I was describing the experience to him because I was conscious the entire time of it and really saw various things in my thinking when I was in complete acceptance and peace, and then when I got hooked into some aversion or so forth. And it's a curious process to me now as I reflect on it. And so I'll tell the story from a kind of that context of where my mind was through it. So last Monday I had a normal day. I went running at 3 p.m. I walked my 13,000 steps. I had dinner with my husband. We were going to sit down and watch one of our favorite British mystery shows. And all of a sudden I had this wave of it felt achy in my upper body and in a really odd way that I'd never felt before. And I turned to him, I said, "This just went away, but this is what just happened." And he's like, "That's kind of strange." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "So I'll just wanted to let you know it's gone right now." And then he's like, "Okay." And then 15 minutes later, I was sweaty, I was cold, there was pressure on my heart, and I just had this extreme urge, nausea that just rose through my body. And the one feeling I cannot stand is nausea. So I was just like, oh my gosh. And I said, "You got to take me to the ER now. This is really weird." And he's like, "Yeah, okay." So he went to get his shoes on, and even then, my brain, it's curious. I never thought heart attack. I didn't know what was going on. I just knew I needed to get to the ER. Something wasn't right. And I'm a person who's not really into doctors. So I knew if I was thinking that, something was probably really wrong. And so we live 5 minutes away. We live in Alameda, California, and we literally live 5 minutes away from our community hospital. And he went into the bedroom to put on his shoes, and I sat down to put my shoes on. And then we giggle about this now. I was like, "I'm going to faint." And I kind of rolled over, and my head hit the kitchen floor. And he came out, and I said, "Yeah, I just fainted, but I sat up again." And he's like, "Well, okay, we're going to get you to the hospital." And so I got in the car. He drives me there. We're the second in line at the ER. It would have been it's much shorter to drive me there than to actually call an ambulance. But the truth is, too, our frugal minds went, "We don't want to pay $2,000. I can get you there faster," because our insurance doesn't cover ambulances, right? So I'm thinking that. He got me there. I was second in. I just told them, "I feel really, really sick. You need to take care of me soon." And he's like, "You're the second in line, ma'am." And within a couple of minutes, they got me. They sat me in a chair, and I just lost it everywhere. And my thought was, my body's preparing itself for something, because I do so much anxiety teaching that and the whole idea about your system starts shutting down with anxiety. And I thought, okay, my system's shutting down. I'm throwing up. I had to go to the bathroom. Everything is out of my system for a reason. And I was getting more curious, noticing that I was getting more curious. And then the doctor, they get me all cleaned up. They put me on a gurney. And this was a pivotal moment. The doctor looks at me and goes, there's a lot going on here, and there's going to be a lot of people and a lot of things happening. You're having a heart attack, and we're going to take care of it. And in that moment, my mind just went, okay, this is complete. I had this thought, this is completely out of my wheelhouse. I have no idea how to help myself. And I just need to trust that whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And I felt this wave of peace over me, like, okay. And I remember thinking, and now in reflection, I thought, well, I want to stay grounded. So I was asking everybody their name when they came into the room, right? And now I look at it, what I was doing was taking that shift from I was avoiding an internal focus of like going deep into some sort of thought that probably wasn't good, to keeping outward focus, to like, what's your name? What time is it? I remember looking at the clock the whole time. This was about 9 p.m. And to the point where they're in there doing their thing. I have awful veins. So, which that means is that they're small, they move around, and they're disastrous to get blood from. And this poor young nurse was sitting there poking me numerous times, apologizing. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it's really okay. I'm having a heart attack and you're doing your job. And she was like, oh, you could just see her relax. And I was just like, yeah, please, And so they got me set up. And it turns out that the hospital I was in, Alameda Hospital, our little community hospital, doesn't have any cardiac care trauma center. So they had to put me in an ambulance. And I still distinctly remember the three paramedics, and their names Tyler, Ben, and Catherine, who, told me, okay, we're going to put you in. The lights are going on. You're going to Highland Hospital. This is all going to move really fast. And the fact that people told me this along the way was so helpful, right? They kept saying, okay, there's going to be a lot moving. There's going to be a lot going on. And sure enough, they get me into the ambulance. The lights went on. We drive over to Oakland, which isn't that far. I don't even know, maybe 10, 15 minutes, maybe 20, who knows. And they say, okay, we're going to take you out of this ambulance. The doors are going to fly open and we're running you down the hall. And I thought, oh, this is going to be like a movie, right? And the whole time, I still was very aware of what was going on, but I also was very aware of a complete acceptance and surrender. At no point did I have any thinking. This is what Daniel and I were talking about, because when he mentioned it, I didn't have any thinking about how's this going to end? Why is this going to happen? What's happening? What did I do to deserve this? There was nothing like that. It was just like staying present, tapping into, I'm a longtime meditator, and I just think I just was able to tap into that space because those two coexist. I firmly believe that. I could have tapped into a lot of cognitions, or I could have tapped into where I was. And for whatever reason, I was tapping into just being present. They raced me down the hall. Apparently they had called in advance. I had a woman waiting at the surgery door saying, please sign this. You're going into surgery now. I was like, okay. And I knew my husband was somewhere in the background somewhere. And I was like, so I signed it. They get me in there, and the doctor, there's a team of 4 people there. And the doctor said, okay, we're going to put you on your back, and you're going to be in surgery for 2 hours. And then, and she didn't quite explain what she was doing right away. So they lay me out on the table. They put this big kind of x-ray machine over my body, because what they did, and I'll tell you what they did, and then this is where my thinking kind of shifted, which was curious for me, is she said, we have to go in, there's a clog in your artery, and we're going to put a stent in your leg. That's what I heard. I thought they were putting a stent in my leg because the clog was in my leg. And so the whole time during the surgery, I had this nausea going on, and there's where my aversion was. I kept focusing on, I don't like this nausea. Please, can't I sit up? Right? I'm asking them to let me sit up while I'm lying flat. Please, I'm so sorry, my legs are moving. And the doctor's like, it doesn't matter if your legs are moving. For some reason, I couldn't make the connection that they were like going, I'm sure she told me, but this is where, your brain kind of shuts down. I thought they were doing the surgery in my leg somewhere in my main artery. But what they were doing was going up through my groin and literally putting a stent in the right coronary artery of my heart. And that whole thing, I even talked to a colleague this morning of how I was so stuck in self-protection of wanting to get rid of this nausea that was still bothering me that I didn't understand what they were doing. And even an hour into it, I said, oh no, I feel pressure on my heart again. And the doctor said, that's because I'm in your heart. And I went, oh, okay. And I didn't really make the connection still of like, what's going on here? Because I still wanted the nausea to go away. To the point where one of the nurses said, would you please stop whining? We can't do anything for you. And so clearly I got somebody upset a little bit. And it made me think, oh, okay, something's not right here. And then another nurse came over and was, kind of patted my head, and that felt better. And this whole time, though, I still felt a sense of peace and acceptance and trust. I knew whatever was going on was going to be okay. I just didn't like the nausea. My brain decided to focus on that, and I couldn't unhook it. So I let it be. 1:15 a.m., I found myself in the cardiac recovery center, the rehab, in a bed in that section of the hospital. And it was completely done. And they had put a stent in my right coronary artery. And pretty much, the timing, it's one of those things, if the time was off or that my life was saved, right? And the nurses were really great that whole time. And it was curious. I still thought I had a stent in my leg for some reason, cognition getting distorted. It wasn't until Wednesday morning when I told my husband, I said, well, how am I going to walk with a stent in my leg? And he looks at me and goes, there's no stent in your leg. They put it in your heart. I was like, oh, okay. Then it all made sense to me why the doctor was a little frustrated with me and why the nurse was yelling at, all of this, because they needed me to lie flat because this incredible surgeon was taking a wire and going up through my body into my heart. And it just, at that moment when I realized that, the sense of gratitude was phenomenal. The sense of gratitude was phenomenal. It was overwhelming. And it still overwhelms me. But that's really, and now that I reflect on it a week later, I still come up with a reconnection to humanity in the sense of, Daniel put it well yesterday. He said it's just in our DNA. To help each other. And the restored strength I got in systems, because if that system hadn't worked, I wouldn't be here. And the gratitude that I have that I'm probably one of the few percent that actually has a system like this in the world that's still in place that did work. I think when you think about it, it's a bit overwhelming. And it's curious to me, how is it that I'm sitting here, or as far as cognition and the way our brains work when we go through something like this, in this space of tremendous gratitude. That's all it is. And a diligence in some ways that I want to do everything that I need to do. I'm fine now, and I will be perfectly okay as long as I follow my cardiac plan for the next month diligently. And then it's a lifetime of things, but I need the most critical time really is the month after. And I'm just like, the system worked, and this is amazing. And of course, I'm going to follow my plan. There's nothing else I wouldn't do. So I've probably said a lot. I'm looking at the faces. And so I'd like to take a pause and, people can give feedback or see, Daniel, how you want to weave this into your question. And I'm happy to continue talking.
I have never enjoyed hearing your voice as much as I'm enjoying hearing it right now. I have a couple of thoughts about what you have shared with us. Would love to pull in our other faculty member here and hear what's coming up for Yuda as we sit together this evening.
Thank you, Daniel, and I feel such gratitude to listening to this account by you, Elizabeth. And when you told us about keep thinking about your leg, and I was at the same time thinking in stereo. How nice it would have been if a nurse or a physician would tell you, "Oh, we are working to your heart through your body," or something like that. It doesn't cost much money just to explain. And so it showed me from the other angle that how clear messages can be very helpful. And that sense of gratitude that you felt, I felt it too. Some of you know that 2 years ago I clinically died, and the people I felt grateful to were when after the 5 minutes when I was resuscitated were as you said, you are so great. You are so, how do you say it, lucky to be in a setting where the system works. And usually when somebody dies, he doesn't come back. So I was one of those 2%, and I don't have symptoms now, but at that time I was really dead. And I will never forget the faces. They were like in awe. Oh, this works, and we are helping somebody. And I think that I admire our colleagues from the medical fields that the help can be so concrete, like when they were putting the stent and now you're fine, and you can see the results and how the system works. And also, like you, I felt a sense of, okay, let's surrender and see what happens, because as it was happening before I died for 5 minutes, I understood I'm dying. And some silly thoughts, oh, how am I going to cancel my patients today? And do I have everything in order, sort of? Did I leave everything in order? And at the hospital, when I was back, my wife came over, and I couldn't stop laughing for 10 minutes because they were trying to figure out. I do also a lot of sports, etc. What was going on? So they say, "Did you take cocaine?" So I I couldn't stop laughing, and and the medical staff didn't know what to do. So they put the stent, and they told me, "We are going to your heart." And I said, "Yeah, they did it once. The first time I got the first heart attack." So they couldn't find anything, but they told me you will need a ICD. So I have an implanted defibrillator system that since then never woke me up, never had to actually work. But since then, I really admire medical staff, all of them. I could see it was in Israel, the dedication. And talking about the conflict in the Middle East, the person who planted is an Arab physician, Firas. So I like it when I go to the Ben Gurion Tel Aviv security. I go, it gives us perks. I have free parking. because of this condition and stuff. So I go at the Ben Gurion airport and I show so they check. So who did the operation? And I always proudly say, Dr. Firas. And I like it that they don't blink. And I said, okay. And they let me go. So basically, the life conclusion, because I think Daniel was asking about life conclusions or cognitive things. I've been working a lot and I'm shedding stuff that is less important, knowing that my statistical chances are with an ICD and congestive heart failure are less than a person without this. So I am being more selective about the stuff that I choose to do in my life and get more perspective. And for me, when you told this story, it was like a mirror image of some of the processes that went through. The first heart attack, you knew, well, that in a day you knew it was a heart attack. For me, in 2017, the first time it happened, they thought that I had a muscle cramp and they gave me exercises, the physiotherapist, and it took 5 months to realize that I had a heart attack, and then I discovered that it was congestive heart failure. So I was also left with admiration, appreciation also, and how we are all so interdependent and so fragile. And also a life lesson, and I think that I also learned from Daniel's experiences with his body. Okay, the body is here. The older we get, more chances that something will happen. And what do we do with the rest of the time that we have left in the planet? It's an existential question, I guess.
I can't remember enjoying hearing your voice as much as I'm enjoying it here this evening, hearing it loud and clear and strong and concise and wise. And as is the case listening to Elizabeth, I feel tremendous amount of gratitude to each of you for being fellow travelers with me and with all beings along this way. A couple of through lines here in what Elizabeth and Yuta have shared that I would also endorse as a medically complex person. One would be that those of us who do cognitive therapy, and I see meditation practice as a form of cognitive therapy. It's being intentional about our relationship to the electrical activity in our frontal lobe. So we can describe that with clinical language. It's important that we do. Or we can describe that with Christian contemplative language or language from Islam or from Buddhism. Being intentional about our relationship to the electrochemical activity in our frontal lobe. Unless and until they tell somebody that Daniel is now brain dead, there will be electrical activity in my frontal lobe. So what's my relationship to that? I practice cognitive therapy in clinical terms with my own thinking, with my patients. I also practice it as a Zen practitioner. Been doing that basically my whole life. And listening to Yuta and Elizabeth's story, I'm being reminded that what I'm practicing for is my last breath. I have not yet experienced my last breath. But I would hope that when I do, I experience it in the spirit that Elizabeth is describing. Complete acceptance, surrender. Nothing for me to do here except take my last breath. And in that act, to feel great calmness, great peace. I think we have to practice this. I know I have to practice this. Perhaps there are some natural geniuses amongst us who just have right relation to their frontal lobe. But they say the Buddha is still practicing, and he's only halfway there. So I feel like I'm in pretty good company as someone who needs to practice moment to moment, minute to minute. I was talking to a patient who's had a lot of anxiety earlier today, and he was noticing that's what he has to do. Pay attention to his thinking moment to moment. He can't go out a minute because he's lost. He needs to pay attention moment by moment. And then a life opens up for him that is a magnificent life. It's a wonderful life of blessing and gratitude. When my father lay dying, he was in a hospital, and he died an Alzheimer's death. He forgot everything, including how to swallow. And so he died. And we were all with him there during his last days and hours and minutes and breaths. And Dad taught me something lying in that bed that no one else has ever taught me. So there'd be an orderly who would come into the room. Family was gathered around the bed. And he'd never met the orderly before. But he looked up and he smiled. And then he motioned to us, get a chair for that person. This is what Elizabeth was doing. She was not collapsing into thoughts about herself. She was noticing there was a young nurse who was struggling. And as a kind and loving healer, Elizabeth realized, oh, I can help this young nurse who's struggling. And she did help her, and that nurse relaxed. This is how I want to die. Elizabeth was framing this as staying grounded. Oh, who are you? I'm understanding it as in the dimension of a koan that we Zen people take up. The koan is a very brief story. The master lay dying, and the student came in to get the last teaching. The master said, I wonder what line of work that new neighbor is in. So in Japan, back in the day, perhaps still, one was very identified with one's work. One didn't do plumbing, one was a plumber. So what the teacher was saying, I wonder who that is over there. This is what my dad showed me. This is what Elizabeth is showing us. And when we're in that position, we are depending on and supported by all beings. Here in the United States of greed, hatred, and ignorance, these days we're again hearing about the supply chain, a word I first heard of during COVID. Well, there'd be a lot of ways of understanding the supply chain, starting with, gee, can I get my favorite tea this week or not. Another way of describing that would be the supply chain starts in the soil biome. So without those beings in the soil, none of us would be here. And it continues up through all living beings and into the air biome, the living beings in the atmosphere. So the fact is, we are here because all beings are here. We are completely interdependent on them, and they on us. And it's in these moments of extremis that I think we can see that most clearly, and then be most intentional about, what do I want to do with my remaining breaths? What is important for me and for all beings, and what is not important? And in that question, I find solidarity with all beings. I'll be back at UCSF in a month or so for some more treatment. I'm alive because there's an immigrant woman of color who came to this country some years back and saves the lives of cancer patients. Would love to hear what comes up for others as we sit together here at the cliff edge of living and dying.